Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. There's a whole bunch of cool stuff to talk about this week, so let's just jump right into it. First up, a new version of Doom for the Super Nintendo is now available to pre-order, and this is a project that is so much cooler than it might sound at first. There's so many things added to it, there's so many things released to the community around it, and I need to take a moment to explain some of it just so you understand what it is that this represents, and it's not just a reissue of the original Doom. So first of all, this was made by Randy Linden, who created the original SNES version of Doom, and he did so using a mix of his original Amiga development tools via software emulators on a modern PC, as well as using other ways to implement different types of enhancements. So he did code optimizations to speed it up, but also used a software implementation of what they're calling the FX3, which would have been a more powerful version of the Super FX chip. Now, this was done via the same processor as the Raspberry Pi. However, this is not a Raspberry Pi and an SNES cartridge running an emulator. This is one chip on a custom Super Nintendo cartridge that is emulating just the Super FX chip, and in this case, the FX3, the more powerful version of the chip. So everything is still running completely on SNES hardware to the point that it will not know that this is not an original FX3 chip. So this is not some kind of weird emulator in a box. This is basically a software version of having an FPGA recreate the FX chip, just much cheaper, which translates to cheaper for you all as well. On top of that, Randy implemented code for Rumble support, which works really well and was just masterfully integrated into this. So sometimes you don't even know it's there, and other times it really makes it more fun, and you kind of get that feedback that you would expect from a big shotgun blast. And this comes in a couple of different versions. The collector's edition sold out immediately. However, you could pre-order this for $100, and the controller is separate, the Rumble controller, but that's $35, which is very reasonable. And both will ship in February of next year, and pre-orders will stay open until August 10th, which I think is great. I'm really happy that Limited Run Games still kind of has the best of both worlds. They have the limited editions that you still have to race to get, but just the regular edition, it's open for a set period of time, and I think that is really, really cool. Another really awesome part of this. So yes, it is a much better port of Doom than the original. It's basically what Randy would have wanted to release if the hardware was available. You have a much higher frame rate than the original. It runs at about 20 for most of the whole game. Everything feels snappier. I did a live stream testing it out below. I compared it to the original a bit, and I showed some more things, which I'll get to in a second. But I think it showed how technically impressive this is. But whenever you talk about something like this, context is absolutely key. If I played you this SNES version on a PVM monitor, but then I showed like a software recompiled HD Doom on a 4K monitor running at 120 frames per second, this isn't going to hold up. But you need to think about the context and what this represents. Back in the day, in order to run Doom at a higher frame rate, you needed a very expensive PC. And not everybody had PCs back then, and they were way more expensive than they were today. So having this available running as well as it did on the Super Nintendo back in the day was awesome. But this is just a step beyond it. I really enjoyed it. I thought Randy did an amazing job having a full reimagining of the game, and it includes all of the episodes, all of the missing levels, the music is ordered correctly. So everything is really just exactly how you would want it. However, when you're buying this and the Rumble controller, you're not just buying the game. What you're really doing is supporting the community and showing what could be done, because they have already fully open sourced the code for the Rumble controller, and that has already been implemented into a version of Star Fox, thanks to Kondo, which I showed at the end of the stream. And Darth Cloud has just added Rumble support to Blue Retro. So that means if you have any of those Super Nintendo Bluetooth dongles running on Blue Retro, you could just use whatever code is released or whatever game has that implemented to just use a Rumble controller. Now, Also, the code for the FX3 chip will be open sourced at some point in the future, in the near future, not years and years from now. I would guess around the release of the game itself, and that would allow people to implement that into existing SNES games, into their own ROM hacks or original games, and it will probably lead to things like it being able to be running on the FX Pack Pro and the Mister as well. So basically, how well this thing sells will really determine how many more things like this we get. Because taking something like getting a new mold made for a controller with Rumble support that only supports this one game and then open sourcing the code and giving it to the community like this, these are all big risks. So if we want to see more like it, we got to support projects like this one. And if not, I guess that's fine too. You could always just, you talk with your wallet in situations like this. But I personally, I had one sent to me, which I was able to test the betas out, but I also pre-ordered one for this exact reason. I think the whole idea around this is amazing. I would love to see another project that also, an official cartridge game that also supports Rumble support, that also has the FX3 chip like this. And I don't care if it's a reissue of another game, maybe it's Doom 2, maybe it's a completely from scratch game. I don't care. I think the concept behind this is awesome, and I was really impressed with it. Also, if you want to hear directly from Randy about this, I did an interview which should be out next Monday, and that was a blast. So I'll wait till next week to talk about that, but this is a very cool project, and I just think that there was a lot of misconceptions when it was first announced, and I'm really happy to hear what the true story behind it really is. Next up, Datadiscs has just opened pre-orders on represses of a couple of different vinyl soundtracks for the games Sonic CD, Sonic Mania, Streets of Rage 2, Shinobi 3, and Shenmue. The prices range from 24 to 43 euros, depending on how many come with each set. And these are all basically just like the original issues that Datadiscs did. They're just represses of them. And if you're unfamiliar, Datadiscs is known for their extremely high quality vinyl soundtracks. I've bought a couple of them and I was incredibly impressed with every single one of them. So if you wanted vinyl soundtracks of each of these, now is absolutely the time to pick them up. They should ship to customers by October or November of this year. So expect them, late fall, winter of this year, I guess. And, these are just things that I think if you're into video game soundtracks, and you like these games, you're going to want to pick these up, especially if you missed them the first time. Because when these things run out, usually they go up quite a bit in price if you have to pick them up secondhand or from scalpers or something like that. So if you wanted these soundtracks, now's the time to grab them. The Mod Retro Chromatic Game Boy Color handheld is now back in stock and ready to purchase in multiple different colors. And there's also a new version available with a sapphire screen instead of the Gorilla Glass screen it usually comes with. The original version is still the same $200 price point, and it comes in a bunch of different colors. And you could get all of the same color options with the sapphire screen for another $100. And they're describing that as the most scratch-resistant display available, second only to diamond in hardness. So if you want to spend $300 on a very well-performing Game Boy Color with a very powerful or a very strong glass screen protector, I guess you can get the more powerful version. If you're somebody that wants to walk around with it in your pocket, maybe the extra money is worth it for you instead of a screen protector, but anyway, if you're unaware, the Chromatic is an FPGA-based Game Boy Color clone, which is running based off of a Mister core that they modified for this, which is why it's so well performing. And they also recently did lag tests on it where they showed the original Game Boy Color, the Chromatic, and the Analog Pocket all jumping in Super Mario Brothers, all in slow motion, so that you could see how each of them compares. And while it's not the most exact test, it's a very good visual way of seeing that the Chromatic has the same amount of latency, so 0 latency over the Game Boy Color, the original console, and the Pocket has a little bit, which, and this is all speculation here, but I believe the Pocket's screen is actually rotated from its intended orientation. So you would have to then buffer at least at least a few lines, but probably at least a frame in order to make this happen. So I would assume that the Pocket's got at least a frame of lag in all cores, and that's why there would be a difference. So not enough to say, throw out your Pocket, but if you just want something that's as close to the original Game Boy Color as possible, but you want it with a modern screen that was designed exactly for this use, that's not a repurposed screen, then this is the one for you. And once again, whenever you talk about stuff like this, context is key. If you're looking to play a ton of games, the Analog Pocket is a far better value because you just get a lot of access to different cores and even original cartridges as well. However, if you wanted to take an original Game Boy Color, put a new case on it, a glass screen, a screen upgrade kit, you probably aren't looking at much more expensive than this, or much cheaper than this, if not more expensive, depending on your options. So I think there's absolutely a market for this. It's just not going to be for everybody, but it's cool that it's in stock and you don't have to deal with pre-orders. And I guess it's fun that there's a way more scratch-resistant screen available. I'd love to try something like that just to see it. I don't have the money to just piss away $300 to see that out of curiosity, but if you get one of those, walk around with it in your pocket for a couple of days and let me know if it scratches. Next up, if you have a 20-inch Sony BVM monitor, this post is definitely for you. VSGravity.com is doing a production run of a homebrew replica of the remote mounts for 20-inch BVMs. And these are mount kits that allow you to mount the remote control unit underneath the monitor for a very cool look to it. Some monitors came with this built in, others were an option. The D and A series BVMs, they were all an option. And a lot of people really prefer to have everything integrated underneath like that, except the original kits are very rare and sell for a ton of money. So the just under $200 price point for these, for full metal kits that integrate and look the same exact way as the originals, is a very good deal when you keep the original price into context. They also are trying to have them painted to match the original look, but that is quite literally impossible because they're 20 to 30 years old and all of these have aged in different environments, in different lighting. So while they're going to try their best, it's impossible for it to look exactly like yours because of however it looks like now, but they're putting good effort into that. So definitely check out the post and see pictures. But if you have an A series BVM, there's a specific link to that one of them. And if you have a D series, E series, G series, or HDM series 20-inch, the main link will work with all of those as well. So basically, if you have one of these monitors and you're looking for a remote kit, definitely pick it up now because this might be the only production run, and at that point you would just be stuck trying to hunt down an original for a ton of money on eBay or something like that. So thanks to vsgravity.com for making them, and links to both versions are right here in the post. Next up, Yahel from Wrestling with Gaming just put out a mini documentary about the Sega Activator motion controller, which was one of the world's first motion controllers and pretty terrible. And it's a fun documentary. It kind of just shows you everything that you would need to know about it, and including some original promotional videos about it and stuff like that. And while I enjoyed the video, I distinctly remember being a kid and seeing ads for it. And it was one of those things that at first, I just remember thinking, could you imagine playing Mortal Kombat where you actually get to punch and kick? And could you imagine even more than that when Sega releases their VR helmet soon, you'd be able to play it in VR and with a motion controller. And I remember talking to one of my friends about it and then just kind of thinking, wait a minute, a human can't jump the way video game characters can jump. How am I going to do that? And how am I going to do button combos where I try to do all these special moves and stuff like that? And I think everybody very quickly realized this isn't going to work. But as Yahel pointed out in the documentary, a ton of magazines loved it. And there was a bunch of TV ads and stuff, which the TV ads I get. Sega paid TV shows to show it off like that. That's fine. That's how that works. But how did all of these game magazines think this was a good idea? You know, did they get paid off? Did they not know what it is that they were reviewing? I don't know. I just thought it was very funny. So either way, if you're a fan of video game history, or if you remember what the Activator was, or especially if you owned one of them, definitely check it out. It's like 15 minutes long, so it's not a long documentary. And if you want to buy one of them, I left an eBay affiliate link, and you know, it's something that I'm very tempted to pick one up myself, set it up over there, do a live stream with the camera on me, trying to watch me do whatever it is, you know, do what I wanted as a kid, try to play Mortal Kombat with it and a couple of other things. And then I would get rid of it immediately because that's not something I would use for more than just a novelty. But I know a lot of my fellow nerds love collecting stuff like this for its weirdness. So links to the eBay stuff are right there. And yeah, definitely check out the documentary. Next up, Marco Retro recently posted a video about how to use certain Kramer switches for downscaling as well. These were pretty advanced devices that were kind of reminiscent of Extron equipment, but made by the company Kramer, and it had a bunch of different features other than switching built in, and some people figured out how to do downscaling with them. And just kind of skip to the end. This is one of those scenarios in which, let's say your company was throwing these out, so you got a bunch of them for free, or you stumble across them super cheap. Sure, absolutely see if you could get them working, follow the guides that Marco posted in the video in here, but don't go hunting one of these down because they're certainly not a hidden gem unless you really needed switching and downscaling at the exact same time. And Marco tried a couple of different models. The VP725DS worked pretty well. It had about 1 to 2 frames of latency, and it worked well with progressive sources, but can't do interlaced at all. So if you wanted to use it, Marco showed exactly what the settings he used was, and it seemed to work pretty well. You could also do things like mix and match signal formats, but if it would treat the input resolution of 240p as interlaced, as many of that style equipment did. And while you can try to take composite video and spit it out as RGB, which is very handy for numerous reasons, it has a rainbowing effect. It's certainly not the best converter because you're not going to improve the signal at all, and you could technically make it worse if you don't have a good comb filter on there. So it's not really a feature you should concentrate on. And also, the VP747 is a different scaler that was reported to output at 240p. However, that had 6 frames of lag. So that's certainly not something that you'd want to be using for gaming. So, for me personally, when I watch Marco's videos about stuff like this, it's very often about pieces of equipment that I have no desire to use, but I either was always curious how they worked, or like in the case of these Kramers, I never really knew about these. So I think that these videos are a really awesome way for me personally of just learning about fun equipment and kind of seeing exactly the type of tests I would run. So I get to see the answers to these things that I'm curious about. But once again, unless this is something that you already have, I think I would just watch the video for fun. And if you do have one of these, obviously it's a must watch because now you can really understand how to get the most use out of it. So thanks to Marco, as always, for doing these. I recently posted an interview with somebody creating an open source project that allows you to use 3D glasses on non-3D compatible displays as long as they're high enough refresh rate and fast enough pixel response time. The project is Open 3D OLED, and the creator Peter had a great conversation with me about why all of this stuff matters, how hard it is to implement this yourself as opposed to manufacturers building it into the panels, and everything that you might expect about something like this. And the short version is, if manufacturers just put a polarized screen on the front to allow for passive glasses, or just added the chip for active glasses, they could, for dollars, if at most tens of dollars, be continuing to support 3D. But since no 3D Blu-rays are released, it's kind of a dead format, leaving it up to us retro enthusiasts to keep alive. And there is a ton of really good 3D content out there, and also a whole bunch of mediocre and crappy content. But the good stuff is absolutely worth looking at. And if you have something like a projector that supports it, or an old plasma TV, that's great. I love my OLED that still has 3D support, but those aren't going to last forever. And I just spent a ton of money on a beautiful 77-inch OLED, so why can't I use it on that? That's kind of the problem Peter's trying to solve. So at the moment, you need to use special players from your PC or PC games. These glasses, you would have to calibrate with your display, and I'm going to do a live stream once I get these in to do that as well. But I really think that anybody who's even mildly interested in 3D stuff, games, movies, whatever, would enjoy this interview. Sharp today, aren't I, everybody? But I honestly think that if you're even remotely interested, give this one a listen. As always, I do not care where you hear these podcasts. They're available on YouTube, on every podcast service for direct download. Whatever is easiest for you is the right way to do it, because I just want more people hearing this stuff. And, it's available as a video on YouTube and stuff as well. But I just I'm a big fan of things like this, and it takes a community of people talking about it to keep all this stuff going. So links to everything are in the main post, including stuff that I talked with Peter about afterwards, some confirmations about different things, and even a slow motion comparison of different types of BFI and how that might affect your setup. Basically, just check it out for everything that you might need. But this was a really fun one. I ended up talking with Peter quite a bit even after the podcast ended. So I'm assuming that there's going to be a follow-up to this at some point, because I love good 3D content on the correct display. And it was awesome actually talking to somebody else working on something like this. And on a personal note, very, very cool that for the first time, after asking the question a million times, I now know why my DLP projector had a green tint whenever I watched 3D movies. No spoilers. You'll have to listen to it for the answer. But yeah, thanks again to Peter for doing this. That was a blast, and I can't wait to do a live stream testing out his kit once it arrives. Next up, Retro Fighters have just launched a Kickstarter for a device that wraps around the Switch 2's dock and not only makes it look like a GameCube, but also includes controller ports for original GameCube controllers. They're aiming to be very low latency controller inputs, and while they haven't posted lag test numbers yet, Retro Fighters now has gained a reputation of being the only controller manufacturer that has been posting real latency test results done with Mr. Lag test kits. So the same equipment we in the community use that allow for thousands and thousands of samples to be taken in a short period of time. I also like that this is a wraparound for the existing stock Switch 2 dock, because I'm sure many of us remember how poorly made Switch 1 docks might have been killing some of those consoles. So this isn't a new dock. This kind of snaps around the one that it came with, but I think it looks really cool. The price is only $32, which I think is more than fair, and it comes with 4 swappable faceplates. Spice Orange, Indigo, Jet Black, and Platinum Silver. The one I have here in the thumbnail, it basically just makes your Switch 2 dock look like a little wider GameCube. So yeah, basically, if you want to use your GameCube controllers on your Switch 2, your original wired controllers, or I guess even stuff with Bluetooth adapters as well, this is the dock for you. So check out the Kickstarter. And once again, the price is $32. So I think that's a good price for a 4-input controller adapter, let alone a really cool looking one that could integrate right into your Switch dock. And speaking of Kickstarters, Downing just launched his Kickstarter for a portable N64 kit. And this includes almost everything that you would need to make a true handheld N64, including a 3D printed enclosure and boards and circuits designed by 4-Layer Tech, as well as the screen itself, of course. And you would just need to provide an original N64 and trim the motherboard. Basic trimming, though. I'll get back to that in a second. Don't worry, this isn't one of those insane projects. But the price is $350, and they're due to ship by the end of this year, probably in October. The Kickstarter has a bunch of different details, including a very informative launch video, and Downing also posted the full kit reveal that he did at MGC this year, a couple months ago. I put that in the bottom of the post if you're interested in that stuff. But I do think that this is the perfect middle ground of a happy medium of what you get for something like this, because you could do like Downing's done for well over a decade and make these crazy miniature N64s where you have to trim the boards down like crazy and there's a mess of wires in them. But the purpose of this kit is to make it so that people with intermediate skills could do it. And while yes, you still need to grab a Dremel and trim down the N64 motherboard, this is something I could handle, because you just have to trim out the outside of it to make it fit into this. The downside is, in order to make it have less wires and less trimming, there's no support for the expansion pack or any expansion pack games. However, everything else does work as an original N64. So if you're interested in a portable N64 and you don't have crazy skills to do a full manual build, this is definitely the one that you should be looking into. And if you do want to do that insane stuff, there's a lot of great communities out there that focus on it that you could reach out to. Downing's obviously been known in all of them for a long time. And if you want to meet Downing and you want to see this stuff in action, he's going to be at Retro World Expo this September. So come hang out, meet us all, and see all this stuff in action. But basically, if you are on the fence about building a portable N64 that runs original cartridges and plays like an original should, this is probably the push you needed to get you to try one of these. Before I go, I want to talk about a live stream I did with Marco Retro using the Extron DVS 605 to downscale TV and movies with the proper cadence. So if you saw that video I did a while back about proper cadence of old movies and TV shows on both CRTs and flat panels, and that stuff interested you, definitely stick around for this. And if not, please drop off. I don't want to waste anybody's time and ramble about stuff somebody doesn't care about. The first thing I will say, though, is this is no Tink killer. I much preferred using the RetroTink 4K to do all of this because of how easy building the profiles were, how easy it was to swap around different resolutions, and how its inverse telecine worked really well for stuff like this with both progressive and interlaced sources. But if you stumble across one of these pretty cheap, I think I paid $175 for mine. I think they're going for about that or less now, at least. Then, or if you, of course, you already own one, then this is definitely something you might want to consider if that's what you're looking to do. So the basic overview, if you send this a 1080p 24 signal and you output it as 1440 by 1080 at 72 or even 96 hertz, it will match proper cadence. So it doesn't do some weird inverse telecine and then send it back with all this stutter and skipping. If you actually have a 1080p 24 source, which could be gotten by any Blu-ray player that just is set to that mode, it would display each frame 3 times for 72. We tested this with a high-speed camera on the stream itself and proved that that is absolutely how it works. So that alone is pretty cool. You could downscale it down to 480p without any issues whatsoever, 480p 72 or 96. Its downscaling is about the same as what you would get with the Tink 4K. What I like to do with the Tink 4K that you can't do with this is set it to whatever resolution that is the target resolution I'm going to, or set my player to the target resolution, then let the Tink reverse it from 60 hertz down back to 24, so the inverse telecine, and then scale it back up properly. That's not possible on this one that I could find. So if anybody is an expert at this, let me know if I missed that. And also programming it was very, very weird. And here's where it's going to get a little confusing, but stick with me if you own one of these. So you need to program in the custom resolutions. And there are 5 inputs, 2 analog, 3 digital. If you only need two resolutions to be programmed in, then this is kind of a non-issue. But when you program these, the resolutions that you program are not locked to the inputs. You just have to first upload them that way using the PC interface and a USB cable and the Extron software. So I was able to add 5 different resolution choices by having the first 2 as normal and the ones that are assigned to the HDMI inputs. When you're using the Extron's EDID utility, you just mark it as an HDMI 2.0 resolution. And then that was able to have me upload 5 different custom ones. You can't have custom resolutions with multiple refresh rates though. So if you wanted 640 by 480 at 72 and 640 by 480 at 96, those would have to each be their own entries, which 72 hertz on a CRT is probably going to be fine for everybody, but that's just something to note if you really wanted to experiment back and forth. Once those are uploaded though, you don't need the software anymore and you could do whatever you want with it. So one of the things I did was take a Blu-ray input and that one that was 16 by 9 and just kind of saved that as one. But we've all seen Blu-rays that were 4 by 3 displayed in a 16 by 9 window, so black bars on the left and right side. You could then just use the Extron's main controls right on the unit. You could use the web interface too, or the USB interface, but I just did it right on there to zoom in to a proper aspect ratio. So you fill a 4 by 3 screen at its native resolution and then save it as a user profile so that whenever you want to watch it, something like that, you could just flip between the profiles, which makes it a lot easier. So basically, after taking the time to program this thing, all you would need to do is flip through whichever options that you wanted right on the unit itself. So I had a blast hanging out with Marco. I was half asleep, so I apologize for any loopiness, but I'm really glad I picked up the device. I want to try to learn a little bit more about it and see if there's anything else we could tweak. If I can try to figure out a way to run inverse telecine, if there's a way to tweak any of its scaling capabilities. But once again, I would much prefer to use the Tink 4K because it's just way more versatile. I don't really think the Extrons were designed for what we're all forcing them to do. They're just that good pieces of equipment that can end up doing it. So if you know anything more about these and you want to kind of share your thoughts or tips, or I should do another stream testing out new things, please let me know. But if not, for now, I might just do one more stream on my own, messing around with it, and then probably just resell it to try to make some money back. But it was a worthy purchase. I'm really glad we did the experiments. And I just think, as I word vomited many, many, many times on this podcast and others, I truly think watching old content on PC CRT monitors in its proper cadence is an insane thing to do, that everybody who's a real enthusiast of this stuff should absolutely try once in your life. Because I know lots of people who love it, and they've said to me things like, this was so cool. I'm so glad I did this. I'm never taking the time to do it at my house, though. That's absolutely fine. I still think that it's worth trying at least once. And if you have a Tink 4K or one of these, definitely do it just to see how you like it. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you again, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.